This is Danny Gould with the Selling Silicon Valley Group, your real estate retirement experts, here with another Real Estate Retirement Solutions episode where we interview agents across the country who have successfully sold their business and transitioned into retirement. Joined today by industry veteran Carl Rizzuto, who sold homes for over 40 years in the North Palm Beach County in Florida and recently has transitioned into retirement. Carl was, in a very short amount of time, very insightful, gave us three main takeaways, which is the importance of keeping a very detailed database and how that's important regardless of what stage of your career that you're in. The checks and balances that he implemented into the transition process for him and his adopting agent, and then ultimately how those checks and balances allowed him to gradually overcome his biggest fear in the entire process, which was relinquishing control of his business. Lots of great nuggets, lots of great takeaways. Enjoy the show.
Correct. So how long have you actually been selling real estate before you started?
Almost 40 years.
Oh, 40
I
years.
actually started in 1979 when interest rates were 17, 18%. And
Wow.
that first year I sold as a brand new agent, I was like 20 years old. I sold or had listings sell that I took 64 transactions my first year.
Wow. That's amazing. 64 in your very first year.
Yes.
All right. So you came out the gate hot. And 40 plus years of selling real estate. And what made you decide to exit?
Well, the main thing was it was 40 years. So I was getting to the point where I knew I wasn't going to do it another, 10 years. And I was young enough to enjoy the fruits of my labor. And I just felt it would be a good time for me to enjoy, more of, other things, get involved in golf and, do some other things that were a little bit less real estate related.
Of course. Well, good for you. And what are you doing right now, aside from playing golf?
I'm just starting with that, but we built a very nice home in North Carolina on the golf course. So the last 9 months was just coordinating decorators, furniture, and different things like that, which my wife was very instrumental in. We're also involved with. We met a lot of neighbors and friends, so we've been doing a lot of things like that. Learning the area that we relocated to. I'm coaching. I've been coaching for Tom Ferry for about 16 years. So, continuing to do that, brought that to the next level where I'm also coaching some of the coaches and, just doing a little bit more traveling as well, other
Okay.
than now through the pandemic.
Of course, yeah. And for those watching back home, that's actually how you and I met, right, Carl, is through that Tom Ferry ecosystem. So it's a powerful ecosystem. It really is. And I know that you have a lot to share with people who are potentially considering something similar to what you accomplished, right? So, so take me through it. I mean, you worked for 40 years, right? Or close to 40 years before you probably started thinking about this, right? And then at some point, you probably say, "Hey, honey, I think it's time to move on," right? How did you go?
I think my wife said that.
Oh, that's
Because
funny.
between the coaching and the real estate, I was putting a lot of time, and I had the weekends off and such, but
Right.
I would bring in a lot of listings and work through getting them sold and everything else. We've acquired a very good asset base, and it wasn't a matter of money for several years, and it was more of a point of just doing some other things. So we took a trip to North Carolina, and we really weren't planning on building another home, but we saw a community we really liked, and we bought a beautiful piece of property in a very nice community. And before we knew it, we were building a home, which took 18 months to build. So during that period of time, there was the discussion, well, Shall we just keep it empty and eventually move to it, or should we move to it? And so our plan was, let's move there and spend more time there. So that's how it happened. It wasn't really overly planned, but we had time to develop a plan.
Right. Right. And I think that's a crucial step, right? Is planning for that and not just going into it willy-nilly. How did you go about identifying your adopting agent or team or whoever took over, and how did that transition happen?
Well, he was someone I knew well because he worked in my office. It was someone with a lot of integrity, someone who was in the business about 10 or 12 years, and he was running a decent business. And I approached him, and what I said to him was, I'm looking for someone to perhaps manage the team and eventually take over. And at first he really appreciated it, but he told me, it wasn't something he was looking to do. And, if anything changed, he'd let me know, but it definitely wasn't something he was looking to do. I don't know if he said definite. And then he called me back about a week later, and he says, I've been talking to several people, and I always had a very active name in the community, in the real estate community, in the market. And he says, every single person I spoke to said I was crazy not to at least have more conversation with you. So we spoke and met several more times, and then I came up with a plan which everyone agreed to, which included him working to manage the team for about a year for me to see how he did, and I would guide him and mentor him and train him. And then from that point, if everything was to work out to my liking and his liking, then we would go to the next step. And the next step was identified with him taking over before that 12-month period, but I think it was around 9 months, him managing things. And then in about 9 months, him being involved with some of the income and expense, a certain percentage of it. And then I think it was another 12 or 14 months later, then he would be fully taking over, and all of the aspects of the deal would be due at that particular period of time.
I see.
But it was someone that I knew from my office, and I've known for a long time, and certainly had a good reputation.
Right, of course. And you mentioned integrity, you mentioned reputation. Were those really the main qualities that you were looking for in your adopting agent? What were some perhaps other qualities, right? Obviously, integrity is the biggest.
I wanted someone who was a good communicator, someone who was strong, someone that was passionate about follow-up, because we have a really good database,
Mm-hmm.
Someone that could get along with the team we had, and someone who was open to growth. So there were a lot of different things. And, a big one was somebody that I could trust, because I wasn't going to be there.
Right, right. Yeah, no, and I think those are all really, really important things, right? Trust definitely makes a lot of sense. And the follow-up, I think that ties in nicely with one of my, biggest advocating points or biggest talking points is that you got to pick someone that's a good salesperson, right? Because this is a sales business. You don't want to pick someone that's just a nice person, because if they can't sell, then there's no point, right? So so you approached them, it sounds like you really were the one that initiated that. And when you made that transition happen, 40 years of work, how big was the database that you were giving to this agent?
I had, because I checked some numbers, we had about 6,250 people in our database, but I would say of that 62, approximately 30% were probably junk, or not so much junk, but they didn't have value. And that's our primary database. That didn't include our buyer database, because we used Boomtown for a buyer database, and then we used, and they're still using today, Top Producer as the primary database. So all listings would go through Top Producer. All transactions, buyer or seller, once they became a transaction, would go through Top Producer. All people that did business with us, every aspect of the transaction would be reported in Top Producer, whether it's a title company, the parties on all sides. So in that 6,200, it includes realtors involved in deals, which I give very little value to, but it includes our client, and some of which may have moved out of the market, but it includes the adopted client and all of their information that we could obtain from any transaction we did where someone sold our listing, because we would adopt those clients. It included, our hot leads that we were nurturing that were sellers, and then any buyer deals we put together once we made them a deal, because prior to that, they would be in Boomtown.
Got it. Okay. So basically everyone in Top Producer, you had touched in some way, shape, or form during the transaction.
Right. But again, I'm saying that, Danny, about 30% of those will probably have no value, possibly right. A little bit more than that, because that also includes sellers that sold and moved outside of Florida. Because right. One of the things we did was we were very strong in adopting the buyers. So I always brought in a lot of listings, and the team would bring in listings, but their primary focus was the buyers. But when we would have a listing sell, after it closed, we worked on making that buyer our future client. And that was very, very valuable for our growth, extremely profitable as well.
Right, because the seller sometimes, like you said, right, they move out of the area, but the buyer, is going to be there for probably on average 5 to 7 years, if not more. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Huh. Well, I think that's a great piece of information, or a great little nugget for anyone who's watching this video. So,
well, it's a nugget that could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars a year if you do it right.
Yeah, no, I definitely believe that. So you passed the database off. I'm sure that there were some fears, however, through this transition, right? So what was perhaps your biggest fear in doing all this?
I really didn't have any fears. And I think part of it was I felt comfortable with the person, and they were working with me, as I said, for a year or so beforehand, actually probably about 14 months. But I also had some things in place. For instance, I have full access to the database for a certain number of years for both databases. We communicate. We have a mandated meeting. Not a mandated meeting, but we have a meeting once a week. So every other week is with the team, which includes training, and every other week is with the person that took over the business, and that continues on. And plus, there's conversations in between. Thirdly, I'm always checking on the database and what's going on with it. So there weren't really any concerns. And bottom line, I made a very, very good income, an extremely good income from the business. So I didn't have a concern. It wasn't like, well, what if he doesn't pay me, or this and that. There were also things in the agreement that protected me from that, but I wasn't really worried about that. I didn't have any fears that I recall anyway.
Of course. Well, hey,
I would say if I had a concern, it would just be not doing what I do every day and stopping that. In other words, letting go of certain things.
That makes sense. Yeah. And honestly, I think that's a theme that comes up in a lot of conversations that I have with agents in your position, where, there is that, maybe they don't even realize it, but like there is a certain fear of letting go, right? Kind of relinquishing that control can be difficult for a lot of people. Totally understandable, right?
Sure.
That's totally understandable. Well, how long did that whole process take? It sounds like maybe it's still like taking place, or.
Oh yeah, it is for
Okay.
4 years.
Got it. Okay. So it's a 4-year period where you're slowly phasing yourself out.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Okay. And
And I would say I'm like 80% phased out at this point.
sure.
So
Okay.
it's not like I'm overly involved.
Well, yeah, I mean, and you're currently in North Carolina, correct?
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
go back and forth because we have a house in Florida. We have rental properties in Florida, but we also have another house we just built in Florida as well. So I go back. I was supposed to be there since March 15th, but because of the pandemic,
Right.
we're still here.
Got it. So during that whole transition, Carl, that you're currently going through, what kind of checks and balances are there to ensure that your clients are being taken care of?
There's a couple, as I said. First off, I have the database. Secondly, every transaction that occurs within the business, I'm notified of through not only the team, but the check system is the company. So I'm aware of all transactions that are going on. From time to time, I'll touch base with some clients and see how they're doing. So different things like that. And then the weekly calls. It helps the team a lot, but it also helps me.
Fair enough. So you're keeping in sync with what's going on there, because you're listening in on what's happening pretty much on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and getting feedback. I mean, when there's issues, someone will call me, usually the team leader. And again, we have an incredible relationship. So there are really no issues with that. But I still have access to anyone that was in my database and so forth.
Would you say that relationship has grown over time? Because it sounds like perhaps at first you guys didn't know each other as well as you do now, right? So it sounds like this relationship has grown over time.
Yeah, I mean, we knew each other, but not as well as we know each other now. So yeah, it's definitely grown.
Had to take a leap of faith there, huh?
Yeah.
But
Oh
not,
yeah, sure.
yeah. Well, in summary, Carl, what kind of advice would you give to any agent who's looking to either make a transition or perhaps acquire a business, right? So either way.
Well, I would say a couple of things. One of which is to have a really good database. Secondly, to have systems in place, because part of the transaction included all of our infrastructure. We had systems for everything, whether it was onboarding a new agent, recruiting, training, transaction coordinating, listing coordinating. So having really good systems in place, having good methods of bringing business in, like Boomtown and Top Producer, having systems in place to make sure your lead management is good, because a lot of brokers, a lot of agents spend a lot of time on lead generation, traditional lead generation, which is important, and we certainly did that. We did that a lot, but a lot spend a lot of money on things like Zillow and Realtor.com and so forth, also good resources. But we had systems in place where we knew what each lead contact cost us, which each transaction cost us based on the leads, what the agents were doing with the leads, how they were following up. So we had really good systems on all of those things that made us more effective and more efficient and very profitable. See, the key is to be profitable. And the key is to make sure the agents are profitable as well. So it's a combination of things.
Definitely. Now, say that you're an agent who's watching this right now, right? And you've been selling real estate for 20, 30 years, and you do have a great database. However, some of the systems, some of the infrastructure that you just talked about, perhaps they never implemented in their business, right? But they're at the end of their runway, and so they're thinking, well, I don't have time to do all of that, right, Carl? So if you were in that position, right? I know that's probably hard for you because you spent so much time doing that, but you're a coach. So what advice would you give to them if they're looking to at least hand off their book of business to someone else? Perhaps not sell it, right? But perhaps hand it off.
Well, you have to have a book of business, meaning you have to have an organized database. If they don't, I would suggest that they start to work that. And start from today moving forward and start from today moving backward to catch up. Mm-hmm. So that would be one thing, but I wouldn't let it interfere with my productivity. In other words, the business I'm doing. So I wouldn't stop what I'm doing and work on the database. I would make sure the database is put together as far back as possible. And someone can say, well, what does it matter if I go back 5 years? It matters a lot because that's when people start thinking about moving. I would re-look at my schedule and make sure it includes lead generation of past clients. That's a big one. Tom Ferry says 20%, 10 to 20% of your business could be from past client business and SOI business. So I would start working in those areas while still doing what I'm doing. You don't want to be in a position where you're going deal to deal without every deal you want to be, and not every deal, but you want to get to a point where a good number of your deals become future deals as well. So if I list someone's home, in my mind, that's going to be 3 or 4 deals in the future. So start working backward and updating your database and start working on your systems. So if you have a team and the team is just, let's just say one person, which is fine because you could have a very focused team. But if you're doing, 120 deals a year and the team member is doing 5 and you're very profitable, your team's still not going to have a whole lot of value because once you leave, your business is going. So you want to have good training systems to get your people up and going. So you want to work on your team members. You want to work on the quality of the team members and their ability to convert. You want to work on your systems so you know where you're spending money and how that money is being effective. You want to work on your database, and you want to work on all your infrastructure. And you can't do that all at one time. You want to do that all
right.
But at this point, I have to go because I have a call I got to get on.
I know. I saw the 8 a.m. Strike. Well, hey, Carl, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for all those little nuggets of wisdom.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you're still watching, first of all, thank you for watching the entire show. I'm very curious, if you're still watching this video, I want to know down in the comment section below, what is your biggest fear? What do you feel your biggest challenge is going to be in transitioning your book of business? I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say. This is Danny Gould with the Selling Silicon Valley Group, your real estate retirement experts, and we'll catch all of you in the next video.